Okay, let's look at the spreadsheet for exercise one, and let's talk about the spreadsheet for a bit. This is a fairly typical kind of spreadsheet where you're going to have like things are coded for item line numbers, and they'll generally, like in this case, they've coded them where it's like in the 2000 series or 21 number series, and then individual things have like individual numbers underneath. That kind of makes it easy for tracking things. Now, this is a spreadsheet you might use for tracking expenses or budgeting expenses by quarters. You see over here, it's quarter one, two, three, and four, and over here, you have your items that you're going to be budgeting for. This in column C is what you're proposing to spend. And column D, this has been adjusted a little bit here. This is a little different from what you would see in your using this personally. But in column D, there's an item for what the legislature actually awards you for each of these benefits. Column E is for where you're going to make any adjustments that you you intend on making to your proposed budget, and then from that'll end up being here's what your operating plan is, and column G, this is kind of important. Whenever you're doing a budget and you have to make adjustments to your proposed budget, it's a good idea to make a note for yourself why you either adjusted it up, adjusted it down, because a year from now you may be looking at this, going to build a new, building a new budget, and maybe not remember why you originally in 2015 you budgeted for this. In 2016 you slept a couple of times, probably haven't had your coffee yet, and you don't remember why you changed this to a different number, right? So then, to turn this into something you can track by quarters, then you're over on this side of the line. And mostly how this is going to work over here is whatever your operating plan numbers are going to be, and this is going to be whatever this number is, which is the sum of these, this, and this, right? The proposal, whatever the legislature gave you or took away, and then how you adjusted it is this number will be transferred to this. Then you're effectively, for almost all of these, what you're going to be doing is dividing this number by 4 and putting them in each of these quarters, and then as a check to make sure that that adds up to this, you're simply going to sum these 4 things, and that'll be your check over here. If this says false, what it means is this doesn't equal this. Now, there's a few things you've been given in the assignment that are not uncommon things to have happen in a budget plan. It's not something you had originally wasn't on your radar. Now, you're going to find out that if you scroll down here, the net of the legislative adjustments is going to add up to about $48,750 before you make any adjustments here. And as we plug in numbers, this number will change. When you have it all balanced, this $48,750 will go away. This would not actually be in a budget you would set up. This is something that would be this is merely a kind of like a double check to let you know how far off your adjustments are. And the first one is the one that most people get wrong or get tripped up on. So we're gonna start with that, and then we'll kind of work our way to some of these other items, and I'll show you basically how to fill this out, and you'll be able to do the rest of it on your own, I am confident. So in this particular case, we'll just say that this legislature has, in its generosity, has decided that we're going to pay an additional, we're going to make available an additional $50 million in insurance benefits. Now, in order to avoid having hugely long numbers that mostly don't do anything. Typically, numbers will be cracked down where you drop a 0 or drop 2 zeros, depending on what it is, and you just remember that whatever's up here is represented in in tens or thousands or hundreds of thousands, depending on your scale. In this case, you're told right here, and you always put this in your budget if you're going to scale it down so your numbers don't look ridiculously big on a spreadsheet. The numbers are in thousands. But in fact, these numbers are in, this is really representing something else. They're just reflected here in thousands. So in the case of this, the legislature is giving you an additional $50 million. All right, we find the insurance section, which is 2240. That's where the insurance is found. Item 2241 is where the insurance money goes. Well, they don't tell you how much you start with. We just keep that top secret because apparently you don't need to know that. That's why you have this. But here in the adjustments, what you're going to identify is that the legislature has given you this money. You need to account for it. Well, here the money has gone up. They've given you $50 million. Since this is in thousands, we're going to drop 3 zeros, so it looks like in here is 50,000, but it really represents 50 million. Scale's different, but it makes it a whole lot easier to work with the numbers. Now, if you notice, that number has now dropped from 48,250 down to a negative 1,250, and it must be 0. Now, here's the thing. They gave you $50 million. However, it's going to cost you $50,000 in additional processing cost, which is where that's using the computers. Remember, it says you're going to basically have to upgrade computers, software, whatever, to be able to give this extra $50 million out. Well, it's nice. They gave you $50 million, which you're going to spend in benefits. They did not, however, give you enough money to pay for the computers and stuff you're going to use to do it. Well, that's nice. Many scales will refer to this as an unfunded mandate. They mandate that you spend $50 million on benefits, but, oh, by the way, it's going to cost you $50,000 to actually process these. You've got to come up with the money. Well, they're not going to give you extra money, so here's where the tricky part comes in. We plug in the stuff that they mandated to us, $50 million to the good side. That's here. That's nice. We also know that there's going to be an additional 50,000, so we drop 3 zeros. So it goes in as 50. And so we know that we're going to have that expense. All right, so now we're about 1,300,000 in the hole. Now, somewhere along the line, we've got to find a way to pay the bills here. Now, this is where it gets interesting. You've got a lot of possibilities here. But one thing they do tell you is you can't pay it out of your what it's going to cost you to rent your space. In this case, because like here, rent. This is one thing you can't use. And if you look at this, this is your biggest. This is really, look down the line, except for salary. So this is your biggest single expense. And you can't use any of this. Now, there's a reason for that. They're not just being obnoxious about making this a little harder to do, because it's really not. But the rent, you really can't trim that because you're in a lease. You're in a rental agreement. You can't unilaterally change this. So you've got to find a way to reduce expenses throughout anything here that's in a yellow column, so it's everything you've got here. All right? And you're very limited in some of these other ways. So all you've got to do is find a way to reduce all your expenses among these things outside of rent and a limited thing you're going to be able to do with wage or salaries, which I'm going to explain here in a second, to get this to zero out. Now, as far as what you can do, Some of this is just use common sense. Where do you want to? Where do you think you can cut something? You don't have to cut all of any one thing. You can make little trims here and there to make that add up. Now here's the thing. The way this works, remember doing a negative in a spreadsheet, you typically put it in brackets. You put it in parentheses, and the spreadsheet knows that's a negative number, meaning you're going to do a reduction. So let's just say, for sake of argument, starting up here that, well, I come down here like travel and training. All right, we look at travel and training and say oh, I don't know, say that we decide that in travel, we mostly use this stuff to train people, these training conferences and stuff. Well, what if instead of spending that much money on the travel and training, what if we reduce some of that, and how are we going to do it? Well, I don't know. Say we decide that we're going to maybe do more in-house training. So like over here in the notes, do more in-house training. There's some fine spelling for you. Hang on here while I correct that, mostly because it just bugs me. There we go. All right, do more in-house training. Well, how much more? Well, we're spending a lot of money on training. Because remember, this is in thousands. We're spending almost $750,000 on travel. Well, if we're doing more in-house training stuff, how far down do we think we can trim that? Well, let's say, for sake of argument, we've decided that we're going to do a lot more in-house training this year, and we'll cut $400,000 off our training. So we'll go 400. We'll put it in parentheses. All right. So here, travel and training, we're showing here that we reduced it by $400,000. Notice here, this went from 725 to 325 automatically, and it was automatically transferred here. You see how you do that with the? You're just saying that cell is equal to whatever's in this cell. All right. Now, let's see what that affected down here. We have now reduced our deficit to balance the budget, given the $50 million we got extra and the $50,000 it's costing us. We're going to have to pay out of pocket. We've reduced this to $900,000 here, so we're making good progress. Now you look down the line and see what else where you can cut things. We can trim a few things off here and there. You see they're spending $500,000 a year budgeted for office furniture and expenses. Well, let's just say that we delay furniture replacement, for example. Give it a rest. All right. Well, how much do we think we can delay? Well, all right, we'll just say that we'll take, whoops, that added it. Put that, this is another common mistake. Make sure you put the number in brackets showing a reduction. Now we're down to a $700,000 deficit. All right? So whatever you adjust, and you don't have to use every one of these. It's up to you which one you use within the restrictions of the things that you're given by the problem. Now here's one of the possibilities. You know that by delaying hiring, that you can save some money here. So you've got to figure out how you're going to how do you plug this in. So let's look at this. We delay the hiring. We delay the new position. Get in there. $6 months. Does it look like there's a break? There should be. There we go. Sorry, guys, that just really bugs me. All right. So we make some adjustments. think I've got a number here that's kind of messed up. Proposal shouldn't be right, because that actually should read 10. Ah, there we go. Yep, I got it. Now I figured out what I was doing. All right, salaries. This is wrong. I put it in the wrong one. Sorry, guys. 100. All right. By delaying hiring somebody 6 months, we can save some bucks here. So we'll say here we have to account for like here. There's the $90,000 for officers and directors. Well, let's work that out by quarters. So here, all we have to do is take. This would be I6, right? So here we go, equals I6, all right, that number. We'll divide it by 4. All right, and that shows this individual. This would be show up at 2250 across the board. But if we divide this out across the board, and I'm going to, all right. It actually has no intentions of letting me just do it easily, so fine. Equals I6 divided by 4 equals I6 divided by 4. I should be able to just copy this across, and I can't, so there we are. Equals I6 divided by 4. And our check is going to be the sum of those, so all we have to do at this point is just simply say stop equals sum, and it's J6 through M6, which, so this equals this, and you can see that the check turned to true, but we haven't accounted for delaying this hiring. We're delaying some hiring. So how do we account for that? So let's do this. There we go. If you look at the time that you're shifting this, it's going to end up being about 48% of the month, or 40% of the wages across the quarter. So we'll multiply this times 0.48. And then oops, got that in the wrong spot. Your numbers will go strange if we don't do this properly. We want to divide this now by 2, because the 0.48 is just going to be for those 2 quarters, for quarter 1 and quarter 2. There we go. Now, on the opposite side, since this will be the remainder times 0.52, Yeah, always go for the 0. There we go. Now, this is accounting for the fact that you're delaying hiring for a quarter, and so it adjusts your expenses. What you're budgeting is it's shifting. It's a little less in these 2 quarters and a little more in these 2 quarters, right? So you're taking into account this delayed hiring. Now, this is going to be the same right across the board with your salaries and wages. Be the same thing right across the board. So we'll do the same thing here that we did here. Come on. So what that is, I wonder if it'll actually let me do that. And of course it won't. Figures. All right. So this, instead of I6, this is just going to go down and be I7. Be the same thing. Equals I7 times 0.48 divided by 2, because it's going to be 0.48 for 2 quarters. Same thing here. Times 0.48 divided by 2. So the same thing. I8 times 0.52, reflecting the amount, and then for that should be right. Oh, helps if I tell it to do the math. There we go. Oops. We did not get to that far. There we go. I7, or equals I7, times 0.52 divided by 2 for the counting for the 3rd and 4th quarters, and then again equals sum, and we're going to use I7, or excuse I7, J7 to M7. Right, so now this number, our check number, equals our operating plan. We'll do the same thing here with the wages, because again we're delaying hiring, and as you look across the board, then these should start showing true. And I'll do this last one here, and then the rest of these are actually start getting, these will actually get boringly simple as you put these in. It just takes you a little bit to put them in. So equals I8 times 0.48 divided by 2, because you're dealing with the 1st, 2nd quarters. Same thing here, equals I8 times 0.48 divided by 2, then equals I8 times 0.52 divided by 2 for the 2 quarters you're working in, then equals I8 times 0.52 divided by 2. Check number will be equals sum J8 through M8. Notice that those all come true. Now, when they add this up, this is going to auto sum, so then that comes true. And then over here, that shows straight across the board that your numbers are accurate. Now, there is a little bit of a trick here. Got to make some adjustments for FICA, because those follow salary and wages. Well, FICA is you see here 0.075. Well, we want to plug that in here as a 7.5 reduction. Again, drop 3 zeros. Only in this case, you're the other way. All right. So here, these get real simple. This is just simply the number you have here divided by 4, and it's that across the board. So your same formula that's here goes here, 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 and then sum it. And I'll show you one right here, and then we'll move on to some of these others. Let's see, B equals J, what is that? J12 divided by 4. Oh, whoops. Not J12, it's I12. Sorry. There we go. That's better. And then the same thing across the board equals I12 divided by 4 equals I12 divided by 4. You're simply dividing this up by quarters unless you have reason to adjust it like you do here because you're delaying hiring. And so you shift a percentage of that money to whatever quarter you're picking up the hire. Otherwise, it's the same number straight across the board. Equals sum J12 M12. All right, shows true. And you'll see over here, you'll see things starting to come true as the numbers do. Okay. So I say, as these numbers just keep doing this across the board, and these shall all add up, come up true. Now, we still have to deal with this. We're still at 592.50, so we've got to make some adjustments elsewhere up here that's going to get us to the number that we want. And I'm not really fussed about where you do it. I mean, really, it's just more, you really have done everything you can do up here in payroll. You can't do much about this because this is set by law. This is sort of a red herring, quite frankly, because you have any choice by this. This is percentage. This stuff you have to pay anyway. You've already done what you can here by delaying hiring. So it's more of your discretionary expenses, travel and training, office expenses. Can't do a whole lot about this because rent's fixed. That's in a contract. Utilities, I mean, how much can you do turning out the lights? Janitorial and similar, that's not a fairly significant expense based upon what you have here. Insurance, can't do much about that. Professional services, maybe you can trim a little bit of that. Same with your computer stuff. That's a little iffy about how much you might want to try to trim there, because remember, you're having to add stuff here to be able to spend that $50 million the legislature gave you. So you can work down the list. What seems to make sense to reduce things? Maybe in supplies, you think maybe you can trim $50,000 off your supply budget. Maybe training and conferences. Maybe you think you'd come down $38,000 there. Maybe in the memberships. Maybe memberships, you feel like you can cut $45,000 off that. And that works better if I put all the in there. There we go. All right. So, we've trimmed right here out of travel and training, you trim $483,000. You're down to $459.50. So we just keep working our way down the list, finding ways we can trim stuff until this becomes zero. When that becomes zero, you've trimmed out all your money. You've accounted for all the money you have to spend and all the money that you put in required by the legislature, this is kind of a checksum for you. All right? And every time you do it, everywhere you make a trim, make a note about, what you're doing specifically, why you're doing it. And then over here, you're basically just dividing everything by 4 for each quarter, because this is you're straight across the board. You should be spending roughly the same amount of money per quarter. Now, in the real world, let's say, just take travel and training conferences, for example. In the real world, if this was something you primarily did in, say all the training conferences were in the winter and spring, then you would put most of this money in like quarter 2 and 3, or quarter 4 and 1. Depending on when these events are held, that might be where you put the major part of the money. Basically, where the money comes, because it's silly to equalize it, especially when you don't spend even in a quarter. Remember the spreadsheet she did some weeks back, where they had like snow plowing expense or snow removal expense? It was kind of stupid to put that out over, say, the summer, because how much snow removal do you generally do in the summer? You would put that, you kind of part it out where you expect historically to need it. It still needs to add up to what you budget, but you want to budget it in the quarters where you think you'll need it, not in a quarter where you know you'll never use it. All right? All right, that's pretty much what you need to know about this spreadsheet and how this works out. Remember to plug in the $50 million here under insurance. Remember that you're going to need an additional $50,000 expenditure on computers to make sure that you get another, you can spend this money. So then now you have to make enough reductions to make up for that $50,000 expenditure. So that's what you're going to do here. This number has to be 0, so you just keep trim things out of where you can trim it, and be reasonable. I'm not a martinet about this, but don't decide that you're gonna have 0 utilities, because you're never convinced me you work in the dark and no power to your computers. So make sense where you do this. Plug the numbers in. For everything up here, you're just dividing by the whatever your operating plan you've worked out here. Divide by 4. Sum it at the end. Everything here will auto sum. All right. So that's how you do exercise 8.1.